This is our presentation asking the question, how do geographers do research and what does this mean for producing contemporary geographical knowledges? Contemporary research into human geography falls broadly into two categories, defined in Cloak 2004 Intuitive Research and Methodological Research. Both aim to produce data in various forms and ultimately contribute to the wider sphere of contemporary knowledge. Collecting data in human geography usually follows a methodological approach through conducting questionnaires, interviews, and field research, although more immersive forms of research are also used. Once data is collected, the analysis and interpretation is vital as it determines how knowledge is created. Human geography in particular requires contextualization of data beyond just mathematical analysis. Another important part of production of knowledge is responding to criticism. Presenting research at conferences allows for more ethical, accurate research to be produced and allows for a wider range of voices to be included. Geography as an academic subject is part of a wider network of disciplines, and thus collaboration is key to doing through research. It is always necessary to consider the broader implications of research and the knowledge gaps in knowledge. This can be done by using contextuality, connectivity, and reflexivity in a critical approach.
The academic we have based our presentation on is Nick Gill. The reading given to us was his 2021 paper with Joe Hines about court watching. Court watching is a form of qualitative research which involves sitting in courtrooms over a prolonged period of time to observe and ultimately pick up issues within the legal system. It is an example of immersive, intuitive research described in Cloak et al. 2004, whereby you leave behind the everyday and integrate into a human environment, in this case the courtroom. An interesting point touched on in our interview was how the world of research is changing. During and after the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a movement towards more digitalised forms of research. In the context of court watching, this included joining online court sessions, which created limited visibility and a barrier between the defendant and the researcher. While Nick made it clear that there is no empirical way to determine whether this impacted the results of the trials, it does raise questions about the limitations of online court watching. Nick made it clear during the interview that his research is focused on social justice, and part of this process is called critical countermapping, talked of in his 2018 article on carceral circuitry. He said that not countermapping is a form of silencing, which shows the importance of critical analysis throughout every stage of his research. Nick spoke in our interview about how he was inspired to research court watching by his previous work with asylum seekers. His research is socially motivated and aims to contribute to a more equal world. This ethical viewpoint, combined with his critical approach, has allowed him to produce valuable contemporary knowledge.
Doing research involves multiple phases. From Clifford's article, we found that quantitative and qualitative research steps tend to stay relatively similar. With a focus on qualitative research, we saw that there is a focus on interpretation of what the research question asks and how the data should be collected. This also allows for greater contemporary research as it is much broader and yet can also be much more specific. The first step in doing research would be to do the research ahead of your question, followed by collection and presentation of your data. Finally, there will be an analysis of collected data and a clear interpretation, followed by a conclusion. Referring to Nick Gill, his research method and steps began with an initial interest through experience being a volunteer for soup kitchens. This led him to the whole basis of the article and the process for asylum seekers and their application to asylums, as well as the process they go through as a result. He tried to find a way of researching the court watching scene in a new and undiscovered way. This ended up being for the experiences of asylum seekers. After he settled on his research question and title, he had to decide how to interpret the data. This was done through the court watching programs, voluntary court watching, reading through manuscripts. This led to him and his team collectively analysing and concluding his research question. Other factors that have not been mentioned but are crucial in the doing research approach are either ethical considerations and safety precautions. The ethical considerations are important all throughout the research process. As well as this, he would have to have taken safety precautions. These are relatively basic and generally common sense. One final step which wasn't mentioned in the research article was a reference to conferences. These are common among geography scholars, as they will present their research as a final stage of checking through their work. These international conferences will allow for any critiques and changes to help improve their research projects and are crucial for completing a research project. International conferences also allow for producing more contemporary geographical knowledge.
Within human geography, there is a deep-rooted history with social activism in order to highlight those suffering. However, this inherently means that much of this research will be in conjunction with the most vulnerable of society, thus leading to the principal relationship between research gain and ethical consideration. This was furthered within our interview with Mr. Gill, wherein he emphasised a need for managing data, a key point showing the need for privacy within interviews and the right to remain anonymous, harking back to concepts within marginalised societies. This is especially prevalent as it can lead to discrimination and fouling of research practices. An example of this would be discussions about immigrants within research, as it is of key importance to maintain security and safety to those vulnerable. This is especially prevalent due to the political nature of this topic and the dividedness it brings to society. Within Berman's work, spotlighting the need to toe the line between scientific research gain, and ethical humanities as an interviewer. Furthering this, there is a need for informed consent within investigations, allowing for the provisions of knowledge between interviewees to be given fairly and freely, rather than to be entrapped into giving research that they may or may not have given up, knowing that it was going to be recorded, and having received the aims, methodology, and how their opinion will be used, and any potential issues that may occur as a result of research criteria.
Not only is it critical to analyse research, but it is also important to understand the broader implications that this research has on the production of contemporary geographical knowledge. When researching for this presentation, we discovered how there are three key aspects of this production. Those are illustrated through the quote that I'll now unpick. Firstly, Glucker and Panett state these three positions as being connectivity, reflexivity, and contextuality. These three streams situate research within a broader network of understanding, one that Nick particularly paid attention to in our interview with him. This understanding of research as a network enabled us to come and see the social element of research too. The contextual position was particularly emphasises this, namely through the ways in which actors weave and rewire their relations. Notable here is another article by Nick, namely on carceral circuitry. He himself likens research to that of an electrical circuit. This is interesting when understanding how research forms the backdrop of a broader system, capturing how knowledge has been configured through experiences. Finally then, it is evident how the consequences of the history of interactions between these networks affect the production of contemporary geographical knowledges. These conditions are exemplified through Glucker's anti-categorical imperative. This imperative outlines how social networks of understanding and experience are often not conveyed correctly during research. Therefore, this imperative will round off the final pillar of our presentation, as it displays how a relational perspective is necessary to fully understand and analyse the broader impacts of geographical knowledge and research.
In summary, court watching is a valuable form of qualitative, immersive research that aims to improve the legal system from the ground up. The process of court watching and how it was impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic gives insights into how research is changing as a process and becoming more digital. When doing research, while qualitative and quantitative research both yield different benefits, they follow a similar process through the stages. Qualitative research, in the case of Nick Gill's research, allows for greater depth and understanding of human interactions in the courtroom. Ultimately, all forms of knowledge are useful once contextualized, and therefore research should not be restricted to a singular method. The ethical issues involved in Nick's research were complex and highly highlighted the importance of privacy, respect, and acknowledgement of the vulnerability when doing research. Finally, research as a part of a wider system of knowledge production that spans across contemporary disciplines. The anti-categorical imperative aims to recognise these connections to better understand how geographical knowledge is produced within a network of research.